in running for the board because I'd never wanted to before, but you know, to provide a voice for the voiceless, and I think there's a lot of folks out there that have feelings and strong feelings about this, but are certainly not comfortable showing up at some of these meetings for obvious reasons, right? It's a pretty tough environment, so it's nice to be able to do that for folks and represent those folks that say, you know, hey, this is really bugging me, but I don't want to come to a meeting and speak up about it. So that's kind of it. And then, you know, there's a lot going on in the next year or two. Obviously, we're in the middle of or at the beginning of a superintendent search, which is really important. There'll be contract negotiations are coming up. That's always a big deal. So those are important things. And then what's that other one? Oh, that's right. The governor's got some new plan for education. That is a huge deal. So anyway, so lots of stuff, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be tough to navigate, but it's going to require a lot of work. So anyway.
And I mean, you hit the nail on the head with what the governor is doing. That's a question that I have put out there to everybody. We know it's on the table. We know what he's proposed, and both, you know, consolidation of districts, and I think whittling it down to 5. And we know you know, change the formulas. Let's come up with a better per pupil number and all of that good stuff. Do you have thoughts on what's happening right now?
Do I have thoughts? Are you asking me if I have thoughts? Of course I have thoughts. So there's competing plans. His is not the only plan, right? So there's some other plans as well. But yeah, so the governor's plan, and they just rolled it out today. It was today or yesterday, I can't remember which. I saw the highlights anyway, and they're talking about some of the stuff that they're doing. But in terms of the governor's plan specifically, I am not an advocate of removing more local control. And I know there's a lot of people that have strong feelings about that, and did during the Act 46 mergers in our communities, which became very contentious and took multiple votes as well. So relinquishing even more control of our school system, I guess I'd have to see more, right? So this is where I'm saying there's a lot of work to be done, because on the surface, I don't like that idea. And I also, when we talk about consolidations, boy, we certainly better have a better plan than we did first time around, because they didn't work the first time around, right? They didn't save money. They didn't provide more educational opportunities. They didn't make us more efficient. All those things that we were promised would happen didn't and haven't. And that's a big issue. In addition to that, are we simply talking about 5 super districts that, instead of having, I think it's 114 to 120-ish districts in the state right now, are we just simply talking about, instead of having all those districts, taking all those staff and putting them into the 5, right? So you have a superintendent and assistant superintendent, you know, right? Do you just stack it and you have even more layers in a super district? I mean, you'd have to. I mean, if it's a super district, you got more schools to deal with, so you'd have to. So where's the savings in that, right? And where's the granularity that we need? Because we see, even in our own district, with schools that as a crow flies, are less than 2 miles apart, they're completely different. Completely different. So how do you do that, right? And balance that, right? So there's a lot to talk about that. That's not something that's going to happen anytime soon. I think the most important piece, and we've kind of already done this, we can't be afraid to say that our education system is broken. It's broken from, certainly from the funding perspective, and the oversight perspective. The educational results, not just here in our district, statewide and federally, are not great, right? And I suspect we'll maybe touch on the budget a little bit, but you know, throwing money hasn't proved out to be the answer, right? So, holy smokes, what do you do? But what I will say we should do, and I like throwing spaghetti on the wall, and we've talked about some consolidation efforts ourselves in our district, right? there's things we in our district could do today that would make our district more efficient, more affordable, and those things, and we're not doing them. And that's a problem. And that's because people don't want to listen. But there's things, and we're going to have to be willing to have those forthright and open and tough conversations, which I think I've proven I'm not afraid of tough conversations.
No, yeah, yep.
So anyway, and then, again, a competing plan, but it's a little different, 25 districts. There's a lot of work to be done here, a lot of work to be done. But I'm a biggest piece for me is removing our hands in our own education system. I don't know if I told, that's the one where I'm stuck.
So we can go there next. We talk about tough conversations, and we know that there certainly have been, over the last several years, a lot of really tough conversations. But in the eyes and feeling and thoughts of many, not a lot of movement forward. But now, I mean, there's been some changes, and hopefully, some of that can change. What are your thoughts of how can there be a forward movement here?
In our district or in education system as a whole?
In this district.
In this district.
In this district,
Well,
what are we going to do about?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, it starts with the board, right? So we're doing board elections. So if folks want something different, they have an opportunity next Tuesday to speak their mind and cast a ballot and choose whatever they want. But in terms of our district, you will hear people say school boards and school board seats are not partisan. Hogwash. They most certainly are. There are absolutely political agendas at play. That's a problem. In terms of what can we do to be better, I had this conversation with Dave Delcor. We don't ever talk about education on our school board. Aren't we a school board? Shouldn't we talk about education? Shouldn't that be the top priority that we're talking about is that kind of stuff? And we don't, and that's a problem. We could go on and on about our board and how divided it is. It's a 5-4 board for the most part. But I look at that as we on our board have had ineffective leadership for the last 3 years. And that's a problem. And I know I get criticized heavily because I'm a stickler for the rules. Well, the rule book is what makes us efficient. The rule book is what keeps us on target. The rule book, and quite frankly, there's a statutory rule book that we have to follow. And there are things that as board members, it is our statutory, Vermont state law required duties of a school board member, right? And a lot of folks don't understand that. So those are things that we need to do. But honestly, if you're going to get on a school board and not do the work and put the time in and participate fully and effectively, why you're there, right? Because that's what we're supposed to be there. We're supposed to be advocating for our constituents, and our most important constituent is who? The student, right? So if we're not speaking up, then that's a problem. But I'll go back to board leadership, and I'm not taking shots at the folks that we've had leading our board, but the reality is this board, it's going to take somebody really strong to bring it together. This board could absolutely be brought together. Absolutely. It's going to take a skilled board member. It's going to take a board member that is fluent with the rules and procedures and policies and all those things, but that also understands what the goals and the priorities are. So I'm not politicking for that seat, but that is the key role on if we are effective is the leadership role. Simple as that.
You were also the survey. I've seen it all day, putting out the survey that you're now knee deep in a superintendent search.
Yep.
And the board is going to play a big role in that as well. And so to have some cohesiveness is really important right now.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, one thing that this board, there's been I've heard a lot of criticism about staffing and employees and all those things, right? And I push back on everybody. Show me a single staff hire, or there may be a couple here and there, but show me staff hires where it wasn't a unanimous decision, including our superintendent, the last one. Unanimous decisions when it comes to staff. That doesn't seem to be an issue with this board. We all understand the importance of these people and the roles that they play, and get behind that. And generally, gosh, 95% of the time, those are all unanimous votes. So that's a good deal. That's a good thing.
So we'll switch gears and start talking about some other things that have come up a lot. And I don't want to call them a problem, but they're certainly a heavy topic if you pay attention to Front Porch Forum or anything social media. You see these same things coming up often, and the behavior, bullying, and whether or not there is policy for both, and whether or not in procedure, and whether or not that's being followed, and how as a board can you help that and encourage and foster that there is something in place and that it needs to be.
That's a great question. So interesting question because again, as a board member, we get phone calls from constituents, parents, all the time saying, this went on at the school today, I want you to do something. A board member cannot do something. A board member cannot do something. There is a policy and procedure in place that we are to direct the person. That there's a chain of events that's supposed to happen, and that goes up the ladder, ending at the superintendent. If they're not satisfied there, then it comes to the board. The board is the last person that gets to weigh in on it, right? So that's the first one, right? So the board's role is very limited on what they can and can't do. And I've had folks approach me and have these conversations with me, and when I talk about I like to give community members a voice, you have to stop them and say, you got to stop, because if you tell me too much, I have knowledge, and then if it comes to the board as a formal complaint, I would have to recuse myself. I can't participate in a decision for you, right? So that's following rules, right? Code of ethics and all those things. So that's an important component. Policy. So policy is a big deal. One of the things that's happened this year that I am not in favor of, I didn't support, was pausing of our committees. Committees is where the work gets done on a board. And we paused the policy committee, and nothing has been done since July, and maybe a little bit earlier than that. That's irresponsible. As a board member, I'm going to sit here and tell you I think that's irresponsible. We have a duty to make sure those policies, that is one of our statutory duties, is making sure we have policies in our schools. And we're fortunate in that VSBA, Vermont School Boards Association, does a very nice job of saying, hey, school board, here these policies need to get reviewed and updated and approved this month. Work on these ones. Next month, another one come up. We haven't done that. And here we are closing out the year, and we're not caught up yet. And that's a problem, because honestly, I think it leaves us exposed. I don't know if it does or not. The responsibility for that lies with administration, right? So it's the board's job to implement and write and approve policies, but then it's up to the administration to use them, enforce them, and create the procedures, right? So this is something a lot of folks don't understand. The board writes the policy, the administration writes the procedures, how they're going to accomplish it, right? That never comes back to the board. The board's role there is limited only to writing the policies. So for those specific things that you mentioned, bullying, harassment, and all those things, right? There's clearly policies, and they're very specific policies and laws regarding all this stuff. And it's very complicated. It's very tedious. There's lots of steps, and it requires skilled hands. And the administrators, they do a good job with this, right? They know these rules, and they know how to follow them. So that's a good thing. But as everyone hears, constantly behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of systems in the school, PBIS and one that they're working on now. We have a phenomenal new director of curriculum and multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, right? And these aren't fully implemented in our schools, and she's working diligently and doing a wonderful job. She is top shelf. What a catch. But anyway, so those are very crucial in dealing with these types of things, making sure that those students that need some extra support get the support that they need. It's kind of progressive. As they need more, the supports ramp up, and there's language and things about those. But the behavior one's a tough issue, because one of my pet peeves is, honestly, on both sides, right? Mm-hmm. Is people saying, oh, gosh darn parents, they're not raising their kids and teaching them manners. But then you go to schools, and schools like, well, we want to handle that here. Well, which is it, right? I mean, you can't have both. And the reality is, we're in a different world than we used to be in, right? This is a very different world, and it's a challenging world to raise kids in. I'm fortunate enough that all my kids are grown and adults. I wouldn't want to raise a child today. I will say
Yeah.
that.
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do I know what the answer is for that? No, but it's not something that we should shy away from for sure, right? And we need to make sure that we are applying those policies and procedures effectively, and I think we are. I think for the most part the school is doing that. I know there's certainly some folks that don't think they are, and I would just encourage them to reach out to their building administrators and address it. And if they don't get where they want to go, you go up the chain, and that's how it works.
So, when we start talking about what the roles of the board is and policies and procedures, and then you're speaking of community members as well, and parents, community members are also part of the puzzle, along with the students. So when you get a parent or a community member that comes in, they are sitting down and they want to talk to you, or they want to express something to you. Here's the question I have asked everybody. Thoughts on the 2-minute rule?
Can I swear? It's BS. The 2-minute rule is BS. So again, this is based in rules, right? So in effective board management, this goes back to my comment about effective leadership at the board. The 2-minute rule, if you read open meeting law, because that's where this comes out of, actually it may not be open meeting law, but VSBA puts this information out, Vermont School Boards Association. The use of restricting public comment is a tool at the board chair's discretion. It is not blanket. They can use it that way, but it is not a blanket, hey, you impose this and that. Something that I strongly disagree with Vermont School Boards Association is, and you will hear it, this is a public meeting, not a meeting of the public. And that, for me, that goes back to my comment about Governor Scott's plan on removing local control. Schools belong to our community. I don't care what the education system says. Our school is ours. It belongs to our community. Our community should be participating, whether we like what people say or not, right? So the intent of the language in that statute is, if you come into a board meeting and there's 100 people sitting there, obviously you need to impose some sort of a constraint, or you're going to be here all night. So that's the intent of that rule. The way it's been used and the way it's being used is cutting people off, and it's not appropriate. I want to hear what people have to say, whether I like it or not, right? I don't always like what people have to say. I'm sure people see that when we have meetings, but people have a right to speak up about their school. So 2-minute rule should only be used when we need it.
When there's a room full of people.
Room full of people, it's unruly, people are going on and on. We gotta tone it down so we can get out of here sometime tonight. Yep.
And I think I didn't ask everybody this because it wasn't, this part of the conversation didn't go that way. In a time where there is a room full of people and you're having to put those guidelines, is there a way for a community member to, in the city or in the town, you have your ward leaders, so you can call your representatives. Yep. Do you think it's worth, amongst the school board, say, okay, Terry, you're going to take K through 4, and you're going to be that person for parents, staff, whoever, when there's something that they want to bring to the board, they can bring it to you, and then, so that there's conversation prior to, and maybe things at the board, on the board, when you bring it to everyone, can be shortened a little bit. Would you be in support of something like that?
Well, we already essentially have that, right? So we don't have, I get this group of people, this board member gets this group of people. Anybody can approach us and talk to us about anything, right? And what should happen, kind of I don't know, this is kind of it's not our board norms. We have some new operating protocols, I think we call it. If we get some information, we're supposed to pass it on to the board chair so the board chair can share it with the whole board. There's no one on the board that acts independently, right? We act as a board. So if someone brings a concern to us, it should be shared with the whole board, right? And so people can do that. Again, if it's a complaint, there's complaint procedures, and most board members are going to refer the folks back to that procedure. But if it's just feedback and that, another thing that works good is just emailing the board chair and saying, hey, here's my thoughts on this. Can you include them in the minutes of the meeting, right? Or send them to the superintendent and same thing. Hey, I got some comments for the meeting. I can't be there, or I may speak more than 2 minutes, so I want to make sure all my thoughts get included. Email them to the superintendent or the board chair and say, please include them in the record. And then they'll be attached to the minutes, which I think that's a great idea. I like that idea. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think there's plenty of opportunity to get folks to have get their say.
Well, we often hear right now that people don't feel like they do. They don't feel like the board is connected with the community
Agreed.
right now.
Yep.
And so, that's just another way to bridge the gap. And
Yep.
so you're saying they can call, they can email, there are procedures in effect right now
There are. Yep.
that can connect the
Yep.
community
Yep.
with.
But I will say, right, because I'm not bashful about saying things sometimes, I guess. But we also need, so why do we have 2-minute rule? We also need the community members that show up and speak to be respectful. Because quite often we get folks that are activists and they want to have their 2 minutes of criticizing specific board members or saying things that are disparaging. That's not respectful. I certainly don't treat anybody that way, and I don't like that. And again, I think that's one of the things that's the fine line that a board chair has to address and deal with. But if you come to the board and you want to have some conversations, be respectful, and let's talk about the issues and not about people.
So we'll kick out of that now and go to the next big topic, which is
Not the B word.
no, proficiency grading, and not just proficiency grading though, but like the whole dynamic of having children, mixed classes, having children that maybe are excelling, but they've met the mark of now I'm forgetting the word that it's called, but they've met expectation. So they've met expectation and they're in your classroom. How do we let them go above expectation?
Right.
When does that come into play? And are we allowing that to happen? Or are we holding kids to just a certain standard and we're not pushing them beyond that? And for the kids that maybe aren't excelling, are we giving the kids that maybe need a little more what they need while we're trying to concentrate on the people that are excelling? So is it worth it? How do we like work on that as a whole? And then your thoughts and opinion on this proficiency grading.
Proficiency. Well, let's start there. Proficiency grading. Proficiency grading is a hard concept if you're my age. Right, because it's just not the world I ever went in, and I think my youngest kids may have had some of that in their last couple of years in school. So it's a hard concept to versus a grade it's pass or fail, right? So it allows some judgment. It allows the teachers and other folks to help them and try some different things. But it's a challenge, and that's been a challenge a lot. That comes up a lot. People struggle with proficiency grading. I don't remember exactly. I'd have to go back and look at our meeting minutes, but there is going to be some efforts are underway to make some changes to this to make it easier for folks to understand and whatnot. So stay tuned, hopefully, right? That's a great question for a director of curriculum, right? Because it's complex. That's really complex. And then in terms of, the kids in the classroom, because there's kids of all ability levels in the same classroom now, it becomes challenging on how do you challenge all of them, while giving the folks, the kids that need a little more, and the folks that need more challenging to challenge them. That's a certainly a tough deal, and I think part of that is through some of the different classes that are offered, the AP type classes, and some of those things. One of the things that's really cool that's going to start next year. The York Scholarship is going to provide some funding by the way of a grant to the school at the high school, for kind of, and I don't like this term, but it's been often referred to as a high flyer, so a student that's doing better. But it's geared towards curriculum that will put those students on a track to qualify for the York scholarships. And if people don't know what the York scholarships are, there was a business owner in our community, Ronnie York, owner of Bates and Murray Electric Company.
Good man.
A great man, passed away, and he had set up and left a bunch of money to the school for kids that went into electrical engineering and those types of fields. And I think I just saw the thing, it's 3 or 4, was it 3? I hate to say it's 4. I think it's at least $320,000 scholarships this year. That's
Huge.
Amazing.
Huge.
That's amazing. And that happens every single year, so that's cool. But there's some extra money, so they're funneling some of that over, and it's going to be kind of geared toward exactly what you're talking about. But in terms of the kids that need more help, again, that's that MTSS system, right? Multiple tiers of support, and all kids will get tier 1, and then if they need some more, they go to tier 2 and tier 3. I don't believe it's fully implemented. It's in the works. Again, our director of curriculum is working on that, and I think doing a really good job. So should help.
Awesome. And then I think the last question I didn't ask everybody, but the majority. Do you feel that we're in a time where we still continue to push college really hard and the trades not enough?
Have you met Jody Emerson over to the Tech Center?
I have not met. I've heard an awful lot about her.
Meet Jody Emerson. Jody Emerson is awesome. She's the administrator, the superintendent at the Tech Center. She's doing amazing stuff over there. Tech is booming. It is booming. In fact, the Tech Center is looking at potentially leaving Spalding and opening up their own campus so they can incorporate more students. And one of the board members from Barrytown, Guy Isabel, and he and I talk about this stuff a lot. We're turning away almost 200 students a year from the Tech Center. That's crazy. So that tells me that tech is coming back. And I think it needs to, because as we look at the costs of college, a lot of kids have to leave, and now part of college that's really expensive has become housing and all those things, right? Groceries and whatnot. Tech is looking more and more inviting, right? And then I think part of the other piece that they're talking about in the state in regards to tech is potentially regional tech high schools. So think about that for a second. So like right now, a student that wants to go to the Tech Center goes to their sending school in the morning, does their called it homeroom when I was there. They call it blocks or something now. I'm not sure what it is. But we'd go to homeroom, check in, hop on a bus, drive to the Tech Center, spend a few hours, and then go back. So they're only there part of the day. They're traveling back and forth. The concept or the idea, as I understand it, with a regional technical high school, they would just go there. So they're going to get everything in one place and spend more time doing that tech stuff. So, no, I think tech's on the rise, and I think that's a great thing. And I think we've got some really, the field I work in, heavy trucking, some of the schools around the state do diesel programs. There's some really good programs in the state, really good programs. So, and I know from the stuff that I do, and then talking with folks in the electrical field, the plumbing field, you can make a lot of money doing that stuff. So it's a great option for sure. Now, are the schools pushing it? I think they are. I think the schools are doing a good job of saying the Tech Center is an option. Yep.
And a lot. The reason that I bring it up is we have a lot of discussion also right now, not necessarily in schools, but as a state, as communities as a whole. We need to start keeping our kids here. They graduate and they leave, and so I think that we need to think about the demographics of where we are. We're in Barrie, and we're in small Vermont, and what is available here, and what is, will the trades keep students here? Because the trades are a lot of things, from hairdressing
Yep.
to nursing to cutting granite.
And
I
we
mean,
all
it's
know,
a
right?
wide spectrum.
Pick up the phone and call an electrician or a plumber and say, I need you today. I'll see you in 4 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah,
right?
if you're lucky.
If you're
Yeah.
lucky, right? So there's a tremendous need, right? Yeah, and I mean, you bring up a good thing about how do we keep these people here? Well, the first thing to keep them here is affordability. I don't always agree with Governor Scott, but I will tell you one thing I wholeheartedly agree with him on is affordability. People spoke loud and clear in November about affordability, and as we watch the new legislative session and see some of the things, we're talking about adding a tax to deliveries. We have to stop this. If we want to keep people here, if we want to attract people here, we can't take all their money. We can't. The burden we're putting on our residents is ridiculous, and it's got to stop.
Alice says tech is no longer an endpoint. Students can take that education to the highest degree of learning.
Absolutely.
And that's very true.
I know-
We're fortunate to have it here.
We are fortunate, and I've advocated on our board, right? We've had this conversation, and I've advocated on our board. Our district should be doing everything we can to keep that tech center here. That is a crown jewel in education, as far as I'm concerned. And just as the city made a investment in their community with the DPW building, this is an investment our communities should make and do everything within our power to keep that tech center here and get them housed so they got the space and we don't have to turn kids away. Absolutely. And we all know plumbers and electricians, and I know all kinds of plumbers and electricians that started out in the tech school and have very, very lucrative businesses now. That it's not like Alice is saying, it's not an end game. This is a big deal. You can go very far in the trades. Absolutely.
So I think pretty much we've made it all the way through all of the questions I have asked in the past, with the exception of one thing.
The B word.
I don't. The what word?
The B word.
Which is the budget. Well, yeah, because this kind of fits into it. But I mean, we know the budget is line by line, and you guys have picked it apart. We'll get to that before we end for sure, where you can definitely tell us what you think. But first, I want to know what your thoughts are on the money follows the student, which is also
vouchers. Yep.
Yeah, the
Yeah, school
voucher
choice and
program
vouchers.
and this. What are your thoughts on that?
So what's the story that crying fire in a theater, right? There's a lot of people that are out there crowing from the rooftops. Vouchers are going to ruin education. Vouchers in student choice or this and that. That's not what's being proposed. What's being proposed is an expansion of a program that we already have. We already have school choice in this state. Towns and communities that don't have high schools have the option to send their students to other schools, right? Because they don't have a high school. In addition to that, school choice here, and I don't know if it's called the same thing for the whole state, but what we have here, it's called Winooski Valley School Choice Lottery. And essentially what it is, my understanding of the Scott plan is expanding that. And essentially what that is we're swapping students between schools. And I know about this because one of my younger children, we did that. It came time to go to high school, and we went here. I'm a Barrytown resident, so we went to Spalding, and we're like, this just isn't for him. This isn't for him. What are our options? Well, the options are the Winooski Valley School Choice, and where could we go? And in all of you can go to all of our schools around us, right? So he ended up going to Williamstown. A smaller school worked well for him, and he did amazing. And that wouldn't have happened if he went to Spalding. I don't know, when I hear people using that as a political talking point to defund education and destroy the school systems, that's malarkey. That's absolute malarkey. You can't say we need to do what's right and the best thing for our kids and then say, but if that's what's best for them, we're not going to do it. Does that make any sense? Does that reconcile at all? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I want to see, again, more detail of what's being proposed. But again, as I understand it now, it's expansion of something we're already doing.
Good to know.
It is, right?
I did. I
Hey,
didn't,
don't,
I didn't
facts
know
matter,
it.
huh?
Yeah,
Right?
I didn't know that part of it, so I didn't know that that's
Yeah,
something
and
that
it's a
we
great
were already
program. It's a
doing.
really good program.
I thought only like we did that with certain schools like Washington,
Yeah.
Orange.
Nope.
Like I
No,
had no
interestingly enough,
idea
like
that.
most of the students in Washington go to U32. So they drive right by Williamstown, they drive right by Spalding and go to U32 because that's where they choose to go. And they get a good education, right? So it's nice to have that option, right? So, and again, it's not, this isn't, like when we approve this, because we approve this every year, we approve right now a certain number. It's not unlimited, right? When we just did it a few meetings ago, and I can't remember what the numbers are, but you approve that we'll swap this many students, right? So it's already figured out that this is the max that we're going to do. It's not an open door. It's not an open door.
So yeah, we might as well jump into the big view.
All right, if you want
So,
to.
I mean, let us have it. Where
Let
are
us have
you,
it?
Yeah, where are you at with it? Where are you? Do you feel like there was a good? We've made it come to a good compromise with all of that, and it's.
We didn't compromise at all. But here's what I will say, and here's something that I don't like when we talk about the budget. As school board members, we've been told multiple times by VSBA, right, Vermont School Boards Association. We've even been told by our district's attorney. School board members should not be advocating up or down on a budget. We should simply be providing information. And we have a bunch of school board members that are out there politicking for a school budget. Fine. They want to break the rules, they can break the rules. That's fine. I'm not going to do that. I tell folks, when people ask me questions, I give them the answer. But I also tell them, you vote what's right for you. Because if you think this is a good budget and you can afford it and you're cool with it, then vote for it. That's your choice, right? It's not my business what you do, and I shouldn't be telling you what to do. But what I should be telling you to do, or what I should be telling you, is the facts of the budget. And unfortunately, one of the things that has happened last year as well. Last year was an absolute train wreck. 4 budget votes. That's ridiculous. Should have never happened. Should have never happened. And here we are this year, and this superintendent has taken a much different approach to the budget. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but it is what it is, right? So here we are. But we get some folks, including school board members and some local pundits, and even a union president or so here and there, right? Union leadership that are out there. Vote for this budget because your taxes are going to go down. Is that true? Yes, that is true for the residential tax rate. So the residential tax rate is going to drop slightly in the city and drop 2 or 3 cents in the town. So, but here's what I want to ask you. Put your common sense hat on. How can expenses go up $2.6 million, but our taxes go down? Do you have an answer?
No,
Right.
I don't know.
Is it possible? If you spend more, how can your taxes be less? Don't we have to pay for that? So this is what nobody's being told, right? We're wanting to focus everybody on, look at these tax rates, they're dropping, and they are. But they're only dropping because of this very complex and convoluted and broken funding formula that we use. The rest of that $2.6 million is being made up in other taxes, right? So you'll hear people say, well, it's grants, it's free money. Where do grants come from? The government. Where does the government get its money? What's the T word? Taxes, right? So there's no free money, right? So the money that's not being paid for with our residential tax rate is being paid for with other funds, other sources of taxes. One main component of that's a big component, is the non-residential tax rate. We don't ever talk about this, right? So the non-residential tax rate is for folks that own businesses, for folks that own apartments and buildings with apartments, or folks that own camps or whatever. So you pay a higher tax rate for those. So let's put our common sense hat on. If I'm a business owner and my taxes, because I'm a non-residential tax rate entity, goes up significantly, what do businesses do with that added expense? They increase the price of goods. So who pays for that? We do. Mm-hmm. Everybody that walks in that store and buys something, or someone that owns apartment buildings, right? Their taxes go up and they go, geez, I can't swallow that. What are they going to do? They're going to raise rents. So who ends up paying for that? The other piece that comes up often is, well, don't worry about any increases because there's the homestead tax credit. right? And that's the one that folks get. If their income's a little lower, they get some help with their taxes. Fine. But what happens to the money? So if I'm a taxpayer and I get the homestead tax credit, so whatever money was taken away that I don't have to pay for, what happens to that? Does it just go away? No, it doesn't go away. The rest of the taxpayers in our state that don't qualify pick that up. It doesn't go away, right? It's all taxes. And that's what I want people to understand when we're talking about these school budgets. Yeah, the residential tax rate is dropping very slightly, only because of this funding formula. That's it. That's the only reason that that's happening. And that's important. Is that good? Sure, it helps people out, but the rest of that's going to be made up also through taxes. So is it coming from this pocket or this pocket? But at the end of the day, it's coming from one of my pockets, right? And that's how this stuff needs to start being explained, right? So there's a lot of talk about the yield. There's a lot of talk about CLA. There's a lot of talk about the long-term weighted average daily membership, which used to be called cost per pupil, right? All components of the funding formula. Here's the thing that's interesting. Anybody that wants to learn more about this, take the funding formula, and it's on the website, on the district's website under the budget tab, and you'll see the whole calculation down through there. And change the yield to whatever you want, change the CLA to whatever you want, and change the long-term weighted average daily membership to whatever you want. Doesn't change the increase 1 penny. So you can change all those components in the formula. Doesn't change the increase at all. We're still going up $2.6 million. So it's kind of hocus pocus as far as I'm concerned. And when it flows to the bottom, yeah, the tax rate, oh, well, because of this calculation, the tax rate drops a smidge, right? But we're going to make up for it in other places. So one of the things that's concerning is there's been a lot of, if you're reading the tea leaves, reading the newspapers, there's a lot of people in finance and in the school industry, in the school business, that are saying the yield, the property yield, right? It's a component of the calculation, doesn't get set until nearly the end of the legislative session. Isn't that crazy? And the yield directly impacts our tax rates. Doesn't impact the expense increase, but it does impact the tax rate. So we're going to vote on a budget on Tuesday, and that yield number could change. Isn't that crazy? Mm-hmm. So how are we supposed to? So the problem is a lot of the people in the know are saying that they think the yield's going to drop, and even a marginal drop in the yield will push our tax rates up significantly. That's kind of scary. Right, so these negatives could turn into positives pretty quickly if that yield drops. So, man, lots of stuff to talk about with budget, right?
There really is, and there's lots of when we first started doing this interview tonight. We said, how long are we going to go? And you said, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. We're almost at an hour already.
Let's keep on trucking.
And that's how it goes,
Yeah.
because there is this isn't just. This isn't small.
No.
This isn't just some small election, or this isn't
or budget.
or a budget. Yeah, this is truly, it's our school, it's our town, it's our community. When we're talking about what is happening right now on May 4th at 7 to 7.
Yeah.
You know the decisions that are being made are huge and
impact a lot of people.
A lot of different things.
The most calls I have gotten are from fixed income seniors. Mm-hmm. That's the most calls I'm getting where they're saying, Uncle, we can't afford anymore. Our Social Security went up. I had one town person, it went up $38, and my Medicare took a big chunk of that. This is going to take the rest of it. And I'm actually going to go backwards on my income this year, right? So there's a lot of fixed incomes. Affordability is a crisis in Vermont. It's not a talking point. Affordability is a crisis. I face it as a small business owner. It's just me. My health care cripples me. What I pay for health care absolutely cripples me, and it doesn't pay for anything. So not only do I have to pay this really huge premium every month, but then the deductible is so high, I still pay for everything. And I have to make my healthcare decisions based on, can I afford to pay for that bill, right? And there's people that have a much tougher time of it than I do. And that's awful. That's a horrible thing. And one of these things that I'll say when people say, but some of the things that we hear is we're defunding education. We've got gutted budgets. We need to fully fund our schools. This is a $60 million budget, right? The number that we're voting on is like $59 million. But there's more money than that, right? We just did every year at the end of the year, our budget, our finances have to be audited. So June 30, it's FY24 audit just finished, and again, we had a $58 or $59 million budget with the grants in there, $68 million. That was our expenses and that was our grants. $68 million. We have 2,002 students in our schools. Do the math. It's huge, right? So when we hear people talking about the cost per pupil is 11,476. That's based on that. Guess what? That convoluted, complex calculation. That's what it's based on. If you kind of do the real math on the $68 million bucks, it's almost $34,000 per student. That's a vast difference in what we're hearing, isn't it? Vast difference. So $68 million bucks, and for fun one day I sat there and I said, I wonder how many municipalities I would have to add up to equal this district's budget for 1 year, and it was most all of Washington County. Isn't that crazy? We can run almost the whole county on what this one district operates on. So I encourage people to dig in, and I've been criticized about my advocacy in what I ask for in terms of budget in those things. We should. This is a lot of money. This is huge money, huge money. And they should treat it as if it was ours. We all have to make decisions every day based on our income and our income going down or up or whatever the case may be, right? We have to make decisions. We have a choice. And I want to know that our school districts being that careful with our money, right?
And do you feel that that right now there's stuff on the table? There are things that we could have said we could do without?
Absolutely, there definitely is. But here's something I want to say as well, because we've got people that are saying, "Oh, you're gutting the budget." Board didn't make any cuts this year. The board made 0 cuts. The reductions that you see in this budget were made by the superintendent and the administration. The board did not make these cuts. The superintendent said that the positions that are being reduced are duplicate and positions that aren't needed because we have enough staff to cover those. That is the superintendent and administration's decision, not the board's, right? So if people want to be upset about that, be upset in the right place, okay? Because there's a bunch of us that advocated that, why are we cutting positions that people are in when we have open positions? And I still struggle with that. That's a problem, right? But and then the superintendent has also told us that there's additional reductions that could be made, but she didn't want to do them all in 1 year. So she's acknowledging that there's more reductions that could be made. The superintendent, not the board, not Terry Rail, right? The superintendent. So if you're willing to look at this with an objective lens and not your activist hat on or your union hat on or whatever it is, there's room. We had, a few meetings ago, we had a teacher come in that was really upset, a music teacher, because she didn't have enough money to buy the supplies for her classroom, right? And we're having the conversation. And I'm good with these numbers. I know we talked, I know you said something about line by line. So as we're sitting there and I'm listening to her, I pull up on my computer and I go to her building and I go to her class and go supplies. That's $7,500 sitting there. So why doesn't this teacher know that she's got money for supplies when she's got $7,500 in the budget, and up to that point in the year had spent less than $500 of it? What's going on? So we're, again, well, you're cutting this, you're cutting that. You evil boards, you Terry Rail, you want all these cuts. I'm not saying I want cuts. And I did the analysis, and I shared this with the superintendent. I did the analysis with our actual spend in supplies. We could have had an increase, but been a lower number than what they budgeted and been okay. We could have given the community a reduction on the total, but it still would have been an increase to the classrooms. And we didn't do that. So that's not responsible as far as I'm concerned. right? If we're asking the community to pay all this money, so when people talk about surpluses, where do you think these surpluses come from? Right there, from those kinds of things, right? Where we're overfunding and we have these surpluses every year. 2 years ago, 5.4% increase. Last year, 7.44. If this one passes this year, 4.95. We are not defunding education. We are not gutting budgets, and we are fully funding our schools. Those kinds of increases year after year are huge. So anybody that wants to argue that we're not funding our schools, they're woefully misinformed.
Let's see, I just want to make sure that we have no, I mean, there's some comments, but no.
Is there any nasty comments?
Well, Terry, of course.
All right. Well, let's have them.
So, no, but not horrid
Oh,
or
good,
anything.
good.
You know, just if there was anything horrid,
I'm really a nice guy.
I would have said something, because I mean, I'll let people say things within reason, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to let anybody be.
I worked in the garbage
trash.
truck world, as you know, for a long time, so I got thick skin. I can take it.
I know, but still, and no matter who, it's not necessary to get
No, of course.
quite that evil.
No, well, there you go. That's a good point too, because it does get nasty.
Yeah.
And let's be civil. Let's talk about what we're here for, right?
So, and
Absolutely.
this is what we're talking about. So, all other things aside, and whatever. So, the only, like I see, Michael Deering says, considering consolidations would give the room, like real consolidations. Carol says, huge money with surplus year after year. I'd like surplus in my savings account.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well. So
And
here's a
win
detail.
so many,
Let me
right?
throw a detail out there in the budget that's approved. That's going to the voters on Tuesday. And I know we did this last year and people didn't like it. There's a director. There's been zero cuts, zero reductions made in the central office, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one director getting a $22,000 salary increase this year. That is not appropriate. That is not appropriate. When we have people in our community that are struggling to pay their bills and buy food and insurance and all those things, that we got one person getting a $22,000 increase in 1 year.
And so, we do have one comment that wants to know, is this guy always this abrasive? And I'm answering this before even you. And
That's okay.
I don't know if I'd call it abrasive. I'm going to call it passionate.
Well, here's what I'm going to call it.
Because I'm super, I'm
Yeah.
kind of like you. If it's on my mind, it comes out my mouth. And sometimes
Sure.
not in the greatest of ways.
Sure.
Because my delivery isn't always great, but I'm passionate about it. And I
Yeah.
think that you're passionate. You're not trying to
Well,
be
I'm passionate,
abrasive.
but I also take my responsibility very seriously. So all I would tell that person is simply, you should be so lucky to have somebody like me advocating for you.
So, yeah. And then Michael also says, Michael Deering says we need cuts at central office instead of in the building.
Well, we need to look at it. I'm not gonna jump on board and say we need cuts. We need to look at it. If we're pushing reductions in the buildings where we're actually hands-on with kids, then yes, absolutely, we should
Be looking at administration.
Yeah, and there's other expenses, and if anybody that's been watching meetings, this is one of the ones that's kind of stuck in my craw this year. We spent 23 or 27,000, I can't remember exactly the numbers, replacing an overhead garage door at one of our buildings, and it was to put the truck inside that has a plow and a sander in it, so it wouldn't freeze. Well, everybody should drive by the school because that truck has sat outside all winter and the sander is full of snow and whatever. So why did we put the door in? You know how many supplies we could buy for kids with $27,000 or whatever? I mean, come on. So if that's being abrasive, fine, but I'm looking out for your money too. So.
All right. So now let's take a minute so you can just say, Terry Rail, this is why you should vote for me, and I'm out.
And I'm out. Peace out, homies.
Peace
right?
out.
Well, I mean, you have a choice. You have a choice to vote for someone. Yeah. Hey, am I brash and abrasive? Sure. But you're not going to find anybody that's going to advocate for our community harder than I am. And one thing I am not is a rubber stamp. If it makes sense and they sell it and it's good for our kids, it's good for our community, then I'll support it. Absolutely. But if you wanna, if you wanna play activist and play the political agenda and you want rubber stamp, then don't vote for me. Vote for somebody else because I'm not that person. So I put in 3 years. I've worked my tail off, and I won't say I probably am. I am the hardest working school board member. And if anybody knows how much work I do throughout the week, researching and being very well informed, as hopefully I demonstrated tonight with my knowledge of these things, I take my responsibility on the school board very, very seriously. So.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank
coming in, spending this time on an evening when you are super busy and have worked all
I have
day.
a cold.
And yeah, you're right. But thank you very much for taking the
Thanks
time
for having us on, all
coming
of us.
in and getting the word out and introducing yourself to because not everybody knows you.
No.
We have a lot of new people in
Yep.
the community, and
Yeah,
not
we do.
everybody
Yep.
knows you, and it's a good opportunity to do this. So,
Yeah, awesome.
thank you very much
Well,
for joining
thanks for
me.
having all of us on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, it was my pleasure. I actually learned a lot across the board, so I really appreciate it. So, all right, guys, we're out for now, and tune in tomorrow night for the weekly wrap at 7. Until then, have a good night.